Everyday struggle trying to get fed. Need a spot at the table for my daily bread. Wonder why we thuggin', though we misled. It's dog when we trying to break that daily bread. You can't feel the hunger through an op-ed. Don't cover how we suffer for the daily bread. Sometimes that pressure make me feel like I'ma lose my head. To make sure my young seeds get their daily bread. Waking up to the traffic in the sunrise. Just another day trying to strategize. Mama running late for work, thinking strike two. Third job this year, cause it's nothing new. Trying to stay in school, trying to learn something. It's hard to get your mind right when your ribs touch. Teacher think I'm mugging, that's just hunger pains. I'm being cinematic, but it's Hunger Games. Try to play it off, mute the suffering. But my stomach break the silence when it's rumbling. So it's quarter cakes, chips, and ramens. Hunger is something 1 in 5 shorties got in common. Hit up corner stores, no fresh markets around. Sustaining from the shelf, no food straight from the ground. Multiply that times all the hoods in my town. We playing in the field, but nobody working the ground. Still an everyday struggle trying to get fed. Need a spot at the table for my daily bread. Wonder why we thuggin', though we misled. It's dog when we trying to break that daily bread. You can't feel the hunger through an op-ed. Don't cover how we suffer for the daily bread. Sometimes that pressure make me feel like I'ma lose my head. To make sure my seeds get their daily bread.
Some scrape their bread up from the crumbs left on the table. Sipping pot, licking the ease, that rumbling coming from behind their navel. You making that bread when you need your own dough. And the sharpest knife in the drawer can get a slice off that loaf. It's the life that I chose, but this life it chose me. You see, my daddy was a soldier and my mama a G. I'm talking integrity, legacy, how to march when I step. If granny cooked it, all you heard was to nothing left. Heard a scrape on the plate, but if you don't work, you don't eat. You gotta earn your own keep. What a man sows is what a man reaps. Daddy took his machete, then he handed to me and said, keep swinging and chopping until the way I can see. Adorn the armor of God when I step on the street, knowing the Lord protected me from my head to my feet. Granddaddy took his old machete, then he handed to me and said, keep swinging and chopping until the way I can see my daily bread.
Still an everyday struggle trying to get fed. Need a spot at the table for my daily bread. Wonder why we thuggin', though we misled. It's dog when we're trying to break the daily bread. You can't feel the hunger through an op-ed. We gon' cover how we suffer for the daily bread. Sometimes that pressure make me feel like I'ma lose my head. To make sure my young seeds get their daily bread.
Good morning. Welcome back, B1AG family. It's your boy John Henry Harris, and we have Farmer Brown, the MC, bringing you this daily bread with B1AG once again. I hope everyone's doing well. Today, we're going to take a look back into history, and we're going to look at the Elaine Massacre of 1919. Now, the reason why we're going to talk about this topic is because in 1919 in Elaine, Arkansas, what went down was one of the most bloodiest racial confrontations in the history of the United States. And at the forefront, on the front lines of this fight, were our farmers. You've heard me and Farmer Brown the MC. We both have referred to our Black farmers as our superheroes, our Avengers, as our Wakanda, so to speak. And we're going to show you exactly that's a metaphorical. We say that in a metaphorical sense, but also in a very literal sense. And we're going to use we're going to show this to you using the example of the Elaine Massacre of 1919. Now, just to give you a little context on what was going on during that time. Now, the conflict, as far as the Elaine Massacre, it began on the night of September 30th, 1919. However, in the previous months, Racial conflicts had been popping up in numerous cities in America, including Washington, D.C., Chicago, Illinois, Knoxville, Tennessee, and Indianapolis, Indiana. And the conflicts were rising because of labor. You know, the labor conflicts were escalating throughout the country at the end of World War One, as these Black World War One veterans were returning home from fighting for for equality, and they come home to Jim Crow South, and these soldiers were not as abiding to the Jim Crow laws. And the Black sharecroppers, along with these Black soldiers, you know, they began to stand up for their rights and wanted fair collection for their payments on their cotton crops. So they began to unionize. And them beginning to unionize sparked a huge conflict in America, as white supremacy wanted to maintain its hold on the commodities coming out of the South. Because if the farmers, sharecroppers wanted, you know, fighting for their equal payment, that was a threat to their basic concepts of capitalism, the way they were, the way white supremacy was practicing capitalism. So we're going to dive into this today. Uh, it's very important that we look back to history. History does repeat itself. And if we don't look at the way that, you know, looking back at the history, and if we don't see the pitfalls and learn from what happened in the past, that will be sure to repeat itself. And you know, with the recent signing of this farm bill, stories like the Elaine Massacre of 1919 are really more important now than ever. Farmer Brown, what do you have to say as an intro about what we're talking about today, the Elaine Massacre of 1919?
Peace. First, I would just like to say peace and blessings to the B1AG family. Once again, strange times. And like you said, when we fail to learn the lessons of history, we're doomed to repeat it. I think when we're looking at this time frame of what we call American history, 1919, if you think about 4 years earlier, this is the establishment of the Federal Reserve. Depending on if you've ever heard or spoken with Jehovah's Witnesses, they say what, in 1914, the king cometh. During this time, the Divine Nine was also established. When I talked to some of my elders from the Deep South, the story I got about what was going on before 1900 in your late 1800s is a very different narrative of what we're told in a lot of our history books. Once again, a lot of my family members were commercial agriculturalists, livestock, vegetable, fruit production. And so I think we definitely need to dig into history and not only understand the things that went wrong, but also understand the power that our ancestors had, and those genes still flow through us today. But once again, if we fail to understand how this manifests itself in the past, we're doomed to repeat some of those mistakes in the future. This is a great conversation that I hope our viewers internalize. When we think about what we watched last week with the Black farmers and the discussion in Congress, this ties into this fight that these farmers have had. One of the things with B1AG, you know, it's the thing, we like to have these romanticized concepts of a Black farmer. But we really, when you say this is our last stand, these are the strongest group within our culture, this absolutely is. History repeats itself, and we're in strange times. But once again, I really look forward to having this discussion. And I would just ask the B1 family to really internalize what this story means, not only from then, but the present times that we're living in.
Now, this short video comes from the New York Post. We do reserve to use this news video for discussion purposes.
Volume. While we're getting this video, you got it?
It was called the Red Summer of 1919, named for the blood that ran through America's cities during months of racial unrest. African-American soldiers had returned home from the Great War, World War I, to a country still teeming with discrimination. And in their quest for civil rights, tensions between blacks and whites reached a tipping point. Deadly race riots broke out in over 24 cities, but one rural town, Elaine, Arkansas, would become the epicenter for the bloodshed. The violence there, lynch mobs, torture, indiscriminate murder, was so horrific it would go down in history not as a race riot, but as the Elaine Massacre. This is history. Dark history. During World War I, more than 350,000 African-American soldiers enlisted to serve. But while they fought for democracy abroad, their own country, America, was still not willing to see them as equal.
White supremacy was very mainstream at this time in the United States. Basically, a lot of African Americans were seeking to obtain their full rights and equality in the United States. And violence was often used by mobs of whites.
Tensions reached a boiling point in the summer of 1919. Race riots broke out in dozens of cities across the country. But in the rural South, something even more menacing was taking form. There, slavery existed in all but name. In a system called sharecropping, farmers provided landowners with labor for a share of crops produced. But the system was rigged. Sharecroppers were often kept in perpetual debt.
One black sharecropper raised $500 worth of cotton, and his landlord told him, "Yeah, but you used $697 worth of supplies, so you owe me money."
Everyone who has any power at this point is working to make sure they keep African-American laborers tied to the land.
I'm sure you've heard the news about the government sending out rebate checks. Any single person that makes $99,000.
For roughly 50 years, the system went unchecked. In the fall of 1918, a black man from Arkansas had had enough. Robert Hill had decided to form a union to represent sharecroppers. It was a dangerous decision, and one that would set off a chain of events involving mass murder, torture, and a landmark Supreme Court ruling. But first, he would need to organize.
In his message, Hill was pretty simple and direct. Why is it that we cannot have fair payment for the honest and hard work we do?
Despite the inherent risk involved with challenging whites, World War I veterans and other black sharecroppers became card-carrying members of the Progressive Farmers and Household Union of America.
He believed that by paying dues, these members could have the services of lawyers and sue plantation owners for cotton that had been stolen from them and false numbers that had been placed in the plantation stores' books.
On the night of September 30th, 1919, Union members gathered in Elaine to discuss their legal plan.
This is in Phillips County. It's basically just a crossroads at this time, a road, a few houses, a railroad siding, no streetlights. There's also a one-room wooden church, and that's where the Union met. Expecting that they might have trouble, the Union posted a guard of about 6 men. They had shotguns and rifles. The meeting's taking place. While they're having this discussion, a car rolls up the road.
2 white men were in the car.
By one account, one of the white men in the car said, "You all get away from there." And shortly thereafter, a shot was fired.
Though it remains unclear who fired first, a barrage of gunfire broke out. One of the white men was killed almost instantly. The rumor of a black uprising spread in a matter of hours. The idea of a sharecropper rebellion conveniently played into the hands of landowners who did not want their sharecropping practices scrutinized. They did all they could, as quickly as they could, to sound alarms that black farmers were out for white blood.
The story gets magnified that the town is under attack, that blacks are killing people in the streets, that there is a revolution afoot.
The sharecroppers quickly formed self-defense groups. expecting repercussions of the death of a white man. But they could not have predicted just how severe the response would be. The following morning, under the watchful eye of Sheriff Frank Kitchens and his deputies, posses of white men were sent to find, detain, and kill the offenders.
When you have an out-of-control mob just being told there's a Negro insurrection going on, that mob's being very indiscriminate in its violence. You see houses being attacked, black-owned homes being ransacked.
The black school was burnt. Notable families were killed.
Black women and children have to go literally hide out in the woods because many of these people are indiscriminately shooting at African American women and their children.
Black veterans and other African Americans took up arms in self-defense.
This no doubt just feeds into the mob fervor. The fact that, oh, they're daring to shoot back at us. This must really be an insurrection.
One historian has identified more than 20 different killing sites where African Americans were being killed.
There are stories that mob members were taking souvenirs, such as ears or fingers from the bodies of fallen African Americans.
One of the leading black families of the county, they weren't even in the town. They had just received a brother back from the French front. They are pulled from a train, put in the back of a car, and they are stabbed, shot, and their mutilated bodies are left on the side of the road.
Within 2 days, 500 U.S. troops were sent to quell the supposed black uprising.
They don't find any blacks killing or shooting down the streets. In fact, Colonel Jinks reports that the city is filled with hundreds and hundreds of white men with guns. Many of the individuals who were hiding in the thickets were former soldiers who had just gotten back from the war. And when they see the army troops come, they rush out, believing that the army troops are there to assist them. The army believes that these people are rushing toward them to attack, and they're cut down by machine gun fire.
Although the exact number will never be known, a recent estimate suggests 237 black men, women, and children were killed. There was an immediate demand for justice, but not for the black lives lost. 5 white men were also killed in the fighting. Hundreds of African Americans were rounded up and put in jail, and when the jail was full, they detained the rest in a schoolhouse.
While they are detained, there is torture going on.
The goal? To elicit false confessions of a black uprising.
They whipped the men, whipped them for long periods of time. They stuffed formaldehyde up their noses, and they stripped them naked and shocked them with electrical charges. They did this until they confessed to the conspiracy.
Robert Hill escaped to Kansas, but his peers back in Arkansas were not as lucky. 122 indictments were issued, and trials quickly started.
The men were brought into the court in chains. They weren't allowed to consult with their defense attorney. The defense attorney rarely interjected, and then the all-white juries started delivering guilty verdicts. In one case, the guilty verdicts came back in 2 minutes.
It's also important to point out that there were mobs of people outside who were demanding black blood. Governor Bruff maintained that at some point these people would be killed, but they would have to have been killed justly.
The governor lived up to his word. When among the 87 black citizens charged with crimes, 12 were sentenced to death by electric chair. Despite the system being blatantly rigged against them, the convicted men had one unlikely beacon of hope: the American justice system. The trials of the Elaine 12 had been highly publicized. The NAACP took notice and stepped in with legal help for the 12. For 4 years, the team faced a series of legal setbacks and advances, until in 1923, the case made its way to the Supreme Court in what is now known as Moore versus Dempsey. There, the defense argued that the original trials had been mob-dominated, and the black prisoners had been denied their constitutional rights. In a landmark decision, the court agreed.
The good that comes out of this is that the NAACP sees for the first time that it can win in the Supreme Court, that things don't always fall along the color lines.
The 12, subjected to torture, injustice, and litigation travesty, were at long last exonerated and released in January 1925. They might have escaped with their lives, but there was nothing that could reverse the pain and devastation felt by the black community in Phillips County, and no way to unsee the ungodly truth that American men, alongside the American government, were complicit in a massacre of American citizens on American soil.
We as a nation have grown and we continue to grow. We don't need to pretend as if we've always had everything figured out. But if we are to do justice to who we are as Americans, we've got to own all of it.
Did you know there
It's a very powerful story, and it shows how the sharecroppers, this all started from sharecroppers just wanting their fair wage for their cotton and wanted to make a lives for themselves and their families. Farmer Brown, what do you have to say about this piece of history in Elaine, Arkansas?
So many ironies and parallels right now as we're coming up on the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa, Oklahoma, that a lot of us recognize as Black Wall Street. There were so many of these stories, as they had pointed out in this video, that had happened all across the country that for some reason they missed our history books. What this represented, and I would first like to preface this conversation by the basic understanding that business is war. Here at B1AG, we don't necessarily promote gun violence as a means of solving our solutions, but business is war. When we think about, as we were talking about the other day, agriculture was the first business that what we call African Americans, Black, Aboriginal, the list goes on. This is the way we conduct the business. When we think about the parallels of how this ties to today, we've been seeing these articles about Amazon workers now unionizing. And the top layer of Amazon, who became the richest, one of the richest people in the world, has a problem with that. We do have to look at ourselves as, okay, since we find ourselves in this situation, what are the implications of this? I'm not one that says, because there's a school of thought that says, hey, well, you know, if we build something Black, then people are just going to come tear it down. I have to deviate away. It's on subject, but on subject. One of the tactics of the Roman Empire, you know, this is way back in history when we study history. Rome had expanded very wide in a whole bunch of regions and villages and townships that, you know, they weren't close to Rome. And so they would send soldiers out to these random places at random times. They would pick out some of the inhabitants of these places and do all sorts of atrocious things just to scare them into submission. This is a continuously used tactic. Nobody has an idea that works that they don't figure out ways to make it keep working. There are many of these stories where our ancestors were attacked, viciously attacked, and then, you know, punished for standing up, you know, for your rights, standing up for your land, standing up for your community. I think about this narrative going on right now where there's this I'm going to say manufactured contention between what we'll call Black folks and Asians. When we look at the details of it, what is this about? Have Black people been going around the country just, you know, attacking Asians, or did Black people stop spending money with Asians who are banking off of our communities? Here at B1AG, we're not here to disparage any group. We're here to uplift the B1AG community. But when I look at this story, man, like I said, we see all of the things happening today, and you can't help but wonder, you know, Earth operates in cycles. You know, they say history repeats itself. This happened in 1919. We're in the year 2021. If we can think about 2019, you know, we had Donald Trump in office, the whole concept of MAGA, this whole division, you know, this whole stoking of racial animosity. You have to wonder what is in the minds of those who are coordinating a lot of these events. I would like to say we are still in our finest hour. As the sister Vicky Diller says, this is the year of the Holy Uprising. And so when we think about business as war, how do we as a community support our farmers? I like to stick with that concept of solutions. How do we support our farmers? Because they are our last stand. They are our last stand of hope in being this full, completed community. I think another thing interesting was, okay, the last hope was going to the Supreme Court. And I think it was very interesting how it cued in on the Supreme Court that was all white males. Anybody with sense that's lived long enough now in North America understands, okay, the odds, as we have the Derek Chauvin trial coming up, the odds are we're not going to get a outcome that the B1 family is pleased with. And so instead of, we saw what happened last summer hitting the streets. In no way do we disparage the people to go out and just, stand up for rights. But there's also a ground level grassroots effort. We have to support the people who are standing up for us. Before we can talk about any sort of business, once again, we have to feed ourselves. Who is the last group of people that can feed us in the situation where people who are upset about our ability to produce, our ability to be great? Who is that last protective layer? And it is our black farmers. It was no irony that last week the black farmers got their first opportunity to present their grievances in front of the United States government. It comes a point, people, where it's something what is it? You got to sink or swim. This is a conversation we need to have yesterday.
And I would like to just point out that this racial uprising in Elaine, Arkansas, again, this was the first time the NAACP saw that they could actually win in the Supreme Court. This is before civil rights. This event, the Elaine Massacre of 1919 in the Supreme Court, backing those sharecroppers and those soldiers down there in Elaine, Arkansas, this is one of the major cogs, linchpins in our fight for civil rights in America. This is what got the ball rolling. This event was proof that, again, the NAACP, this proved to them that they could actually win in Supreme Court in America. And it's almost shameful that the farmers and these sharecroppers and even those soldiers put so much on the line, and yet the farmers, as far as civil rights are concerned, they're still fighting for their civil rights, but they're fighting alone. And
once again, think about this history, Brian, cutting you off. In 1919, black farmers still represented up to 14 to 15% of the farmers in North America. These timelines are very important. We were still 14 to 15% of 100% of farmers in North America, up to 9 million acres of land that these farmers were producing on. When we think about these concepts of affirmative action, civil rights, we're in a time now where we need tangibles. What was the outcomes of all of these fights? It equated to less land. It equated to less farmers as we got to 2012, where the number got down to 2%. As the elder John Boyd eloquently laid out last week, we're less than 1.4% now. And so I would hope the B1 family, because like I said, we're here to have this conversation. Like Neely Fuller, I'm still learning. You brought this to my attention a few months ago, man. And it's like, how am I supposed to look at this? These parallels are so crazy. And I would also like to say, 6 years after this in 1925, most people don't realize that black male unemployment was lower than white male unemployment. Let me repeat that. In 1925, black male unemployment was lower than white male unemployment. What is the reason of this? Because we were more agrarian. We were more involved in agriculture. We were more involved in production. And we think about the years after that, this is when the concept of the Industrial Revolution hit. This is when the concept of, okay, hey, y'all leave the South. Y'all stop producing. Why don't y'all come up here and work in these factories? Going back to these factories, I hate skipping around, but we really have to put this in context. It was another elder, George Washington Carver, that helped Henry Ford come up with this concept of an assembly line. And so once again, when we think about the brilliant minds right now that we have sprouting up all across what we'll call North America, what is the context that we want to teach our seeds? What is the context that we want to direct our brilliant minds within the B1AG community when it comes to, okay, what is the best way to build our community? Not only the spiritual aspect of our community, but economics. It was when we were producers. Like I said, most of us, we keep hearing the story of Black Wall Street and we immediately go to the economics of Black Wall Street versus understanding what were the cornerstones of what built Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street had no help. In Tulsa, they had to produce their own food. Once you produce your own food, the mind goes to realizing how many other things within a functional civilization or society that you have to produce for yourself. Here at B1AG, we're not here to steer anybody's opinion one way or the other outside of we need to produce, y'all.
It's a very simple message. We need to produce. When we produce, history shows us that that's when we were our strongest. When we had our farmers, when we were sustaining for ourselves, there was no unemployment. There's very low unemployment. There's always work to do. And when we steered away from farming, that's when unemployment went up. Again, every society across the globe is based in agriculture. You know, we look at the stock market. Me and Farmer Brown was talking about this the other day. You know, the stock market, they trade commodities. But what was the first commodities in America to be traded on the stock market? Farm products, food, fiber, food fiber, timber. You know, these are all things that farmers grow. Yes, us. You know, so you got to understand when we talk about even things like reparations. Honestly, America doesn't have enough money to pay us back. You know, because all that free labor, all of those products developed during slavery, those are the foundations of the company and the country today. Where do you think Johnson & Johnson comes from? You think all little cotton balls and little, products like that. Yeah, those cotton balls. Yeah, that came from slavery. You know, DuPont. You know, all these major corporations now, Procter & Gamble. All of these companies started in slavery. You see how they're global economic giants today that started with slavery. Started with our farmers, our sharecroppers. That's why we fight. We need to really fight for our farmers. Because think about it. Could you imagine still trying to fight for civil rights in 2021? Could you imagine still trying to fight for civil rights in 2021? That's what our farmers are. That's the fight they're still fighting. They are still fighting that fight. Now, I also want to point out a couple things. Now, with the Elaine Massacre in 1919, it also showed how they used debt as a new form of slavery. Pay attention, y'all. They're using debt as a new form of slavery. And also, you know, we talk about the Karen, you know, the Karen syndrome. You know, this massacre was basically started by rumor and exaggerations of a Black insurrection. And these rumors were started because how dare these Blacks choose to defend themselves and we're trying to kill them? Like, can you imagine the narcissistic arrogance of, and just how deep white supremacy runs for someone to get upset that you're actually trying to defend yourself? You got to pay attention, y'all.
You know, once again, I told you how I feel about that word supremacy. I'll say it for the sake of conversation. But once again, if I'm LeBron and I've already beat you, I've already got my ring and I got my trophy, why would I go back and keep playing you? Why would I keep having to go back and put all of this time, effort, energy, and money in playing you if I've beat you? It's a mind game, people. We haven't been beaten. But as we watch the plight of our farmers, there's so much more going on with the plight of Black farmers than just, you know, this, once again, romanticized concept of what a Black farmer is. They represent production. They represent us as a productive people. And these aren't the narratives that mainstream is going to, media is going to show you of us. They're going to show you hip hop. I don't even want to say hip hop artists swinging down poles down to hell. They're going to show us selling WAP. They will never show you the best images of ourselves when we were producers. The other day, I was listening to a brother talking about Bruce's Beach out in Carolina and how, you know, this was a very successful family who was able to get a very key spot in Los Angeles, which is now a very popular beach, and how the city came together. The system that we keep wanting to go vote and ask for help came together and said, no, we got to take this land from these people, and we're going to make it an open space for everybody. This goes back to this concept of socially disadvantaged. We got to stop letting people water down our narratives. And once again, we're the ones in control of this. If we're only getting our information from mainstream news, I mean, it's good to know what people around you think. But at the end of the day, when we're able to codify around the central idea of we need to become producers over consumers, to that degree, we're able to, if you want to say, fight this war, this economic war, businesses war. It starts with our producers who are literally putting the seeds in the ground. Once again, when I was listening last week to the farmers, the stories that these farmers were telling, when you were thinking about Shirley Sherrod, her whole mission started from watching her father get killed by another white farmer out of jealousy. Hey, man, this black dude is producing. It's one thing you're jealous of me. I'm pulling up in a Maybach. You know, I got all these blood diamonds around my neck. You know, I got all these scantily clad women around me. That's a competition for somebody else. We're talking about the right, our you know, however you classify God, the Most High, however we got here. It is our right as a group of living organisms. I see the sister said reparations. We get what we ask for. If we're asking for somebody to be nice to us, hey, I can't eat niceness. I can't pay my bills with niceness. I can't buy acres with niceness. We got to be very concise, very codified around what we're demanding. Keyword demanding. There's a difference between asking, because when you ask somebody for something, you give them the power to say no. We need to support our black farmers. We need to support those who are producing. We need to support those who have already put in the labor. When I think about the Southern Federation of Cooperatives, when I think about the Southwest Georgia Project, when I think about the brother Malik Yakini up in Detroit, when I think about Corey Goo down in Florida, when I think about Ron Finley out West Coast, we got brothers and sisters all around this country right now who's putting in this work. What can we as a community do to support the work that they're already doing? We don't need to recreate the wheel. We have these ancestral genes running through us. It's a lot of technology going on right now. And once again, it's a mind game. Business is war. Protect the mind.
And I would like to touch on, you know, they really got scared when the black sharecroppers got together and said, hey, we're going to unionize and we're going to demand equal pay. And if they don't pay us, we're going to sue them, because that's what the law says we can do. And that's what really sparked off the tension, the violence. It wasn't from those sharecroppers. The violence was brought to them, because how dare they want to get paid what they're supposed to be paid? How dare they want equality? How dare they try to be free here in America? I'm telling y'all, farming, that's the biggest freedom you can have. It's the biggest freedom you can have. And honestly, farming is the most American, it's one of the most American concepts in this country is farming, because that's what this country was built on, agriculture. So y'all know that's where the strength is, that's where the money is, that's where the bag is. Black men are one of the most unemployed sectors in this country right now. We don't participate in agriculture enough. Agriculture, that's where the bag is, that's where the jobs are. 30 to 40,000 jobs outside in agriculture. And I'm not just talking about farming, but it's 30 to 40,000 jobs that go unfilled every single year in the agriculture sector, because we just don't know about the jobs, or we just don't have interest. If you want to help fix the unemployment problem in America, black men, black women, let's turn to agriculture. This will not be the first time we do this in history, but it's always been a profitable and practical remedy.
Keep it real, bro. We had discussed this a few weeks ago. A lot of our brothers and sisters are already in agriculture anyway, in the prison system, making pennies on the dollar. When we think about ways to build our communities, we see that the president had a big hand in why hundreds of thousands, president and vice president, had a hand in hundreds of thousands of these people being gone out of our communities. What are codified solutions that we can come with? Because, I mean, we can spend only so much time complaining until we're activated. How do we keep our young men and women out of prison? By creating these jobs. What do these jobs consist of? It consists of feeding our community. That's nothing radical. I had put a post on Facebook a few days ago. You know, just it's very interesting the way people approach us speaking up about just very human, just concepts of, hey, we want to be complete people. We see that there's obviously a bag in being silent about these things. We got to create the bags. Production over consumption. Absolutely, sister. Production over consumption. If we can just feed ourselves, do you realize how many jobs that will create across the country? These aren't jobs where people's going to retire from. You know, right now, the retirement system, I've seen stories about a lot of banks going under right now around America. I keep hearing people throw this word back to normal around. And, you know, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but what we thought was normal is not going to happen anymore. But the beauty of it is we're in a position to write what this future turns into. And it's not selling WAP or sliding down poles to hell. This is becoming the producers. It's tapping into that ancestral energy that got us here. We are the strongest group of people on this planet. There is no other group of people on this planet that have endured the hell that we have. That's not to take away from the struggles of every living organism on this planet. For those that read the good book, it says study the ant, right? Studying the ant means, okay, I'm not just going to watch you go about. What do you notice that an ant does when we think about Tulsa and Black Wall Street and things like this, Elaine riot? An ant keeps building. An anteater is always going to come around with his nose dipping into your ant mound, you know, sucking up your ants eating. The Most High created an anteater, but it also gave ants the ability to work together to keep building these mounds. Oh, you knock it down, I'm going to build one stronger. This turns into innovation. This turns into creating this future. This comes into creating a whole, when we were talking about Wakanda, we can create this Wakanda right now, yesterday. But it all starts with the mind. It all starts with valuation. You know, how long do we have these conversations scared about being productive of what we think somebody's going to do to us? We were not made with a spirit of fear. Fear is something that has to be instilled in you. When I look at the media right now, there's a hellified approach to really make us feel bad about ourselves. There's this grand approach to keep us divided from one another. I was listening to a sister the other day. She was saying, you know, back during slavery, they put muzzles on the sisters' mouths because they were speaking into existence, power through the sisters, right? And so once again, how do we capitalize on these things which society has shown us are very powerful? If the Black male participation in agriculture wasn't powerful, why would the Elaine Massacre have happened? If the Black woman putting her power, her magic into this wasn't powerful, why put the muzzle on there? Why is Goldman Sachs going to invest all this money? Hey, I need y'all to look to me for the bag. Don't look to them. Don't look to your own. Look to me for the bag. We're not here to disparage nobody. We're here to uplift the B1AG community. We're here to come up with codified solutions. How do we raise the seeds for the next generation? How do we support our Black farmers? How do we support our producers? How do we have our children focusing on what they can create versus what they consume? This is what this is about. I got to keep a smile on my face from frowning. My frown doesn't come from depression. It comes from, hey, y'all, do y'all see this gold mine in front of us right now? There's never been a time in my 40 years on this planet that we've had so many opportunities. I keep having to go back to Master P. Okay, this man came out of nowhere and showed you, hey, I'm going to make a grocery store. I would hope that the trap stars around America, I would hope that the business people around America, I would hope some of that $10 billion that Goldman Sachs is going to rain on the sisters goes into production because the sisters got to eat. The other day, the sister, Vicky Dillard, was talking about, sisters down in Florida and Georgia just trying to get hair products. Well, guess what? Some of these hair products are agricultural products. They're agricultural goods. I would encourage you to do the history of hemp production, especially in what we'll call the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Black people had a hand in building hemp. Out of this hemp, you get certain shea butters, and it's very healthy, actually. You get fibers to build things. And so by simply evaluating agriculture, evaluating our place within agriculture, we then find the blueprint to our liberation.
And I know one thing I definitely preach and I believe in wholeheartedly is that our liberation can be found in agriculture. All the many of the issues that we face in this country and even all over the world, as melanated people, can be solved through agriculture. Because the more we can take care of ourselves, sustain ourselves, do for ourselves, you don't have to deal with others. And the more you can build up and live for yourself, why would you have to be oppressed? Why do you have to worry about a job if you're making your own money? Why do I have to worry about food stamps when I can grow enough food to feed in my backyard, if I can grow enough food to feed everybody in my family? It's very simple, very simple. I got my degree in economics from the University of Kentucky. And I mean, this is just simple math. Hey, agriculture is the root of civilization. And if we can get our hands back in that dirt and master the soil again, we will master economics for the B1 family. You got any last words for him, Farmer Brown?
I promise your allies won't hate you if you learn how to feed yourself, if you value that. But, people can help you based on how you're willing to help yourself. I'm allergic to losses personally, and I hate the word no. And so I figured out over the course of my life, guess what? Nobody can tell you no if you don't ask. This is a codified effort. As a brother said the other day, farm work isn't easy, but this oppression that we're dealing with isn't easy. The degree we value each other. I want to make sure my brother and sister eat. I want to make sure my children eat. If we can start from that common place, we don't have to talk. We don't have to discuss the divisions we have within our community. It's B1 first. To keep this B1 organism that we call Black America, or however we want to classify it, we have to eat first. And so the degree that we can come together, our seeds watch us. They watch us work together. They watch this person over here with the back to lift 100 thousands of pounds. They watch how they apply that strength. They watch the sister get that magic going in our mind, how to make the most out of least. They watch the people with the mouthpieces, the influencers, tell everybody about these great products that these B1AG producers are producing. The power is in our hands, y'all. And, I'm a proponent of not just keep giving my power away.
And, as we've learned throughout history, our biggest strength is working together, unity. Many hands make light work. Many hands make light work. So if we want to have an easier life, if we want to make things easier for ourselves as a community, hey, let's contribute our hands and get to work. So as we end every show, Farmer Brown, you gotta let the people know why B1AG is here. Because if they really want to know something, what do they have to do?
Get codified and learn how to grow something.
There it is. B1AG, I'd like to thank you for checking in today with your daily bread. I hope you feel uplifted and well fed. Have a blessed and prosperous day, and we'll see you tomorrow.